Hello everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be discussing my May wrap-up, but because it was so pathetic, I will also be discussing my June TBR. If you haven't seen my May TBR, I will have it linked so you can go watch that and get an idea of why I chose these books to begin with and what these books are about. The first book I read this month is titled A Gentleman in Moscow by Immortalis. If you follow me on Goodreads, which you should, you would know that I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Now, I'm not someone who really restricts my 5 out of 5 stars because I really feel that if it's a great book and I love it, I want to give it 5 stars because otherwise I get too caught up in, is this book equal to this 5-star book? So in my mind, I have different 5 stars, but as far as Goodreads goes, you can't really tell the difference between those 5 stars. It's just in my mind, or maybe it says it within my review. This is the best book I have read so far this year. I did not expect to love it as much as I did. The characters, oh my gosh, I'm such a character-driven person, and the minor characters and the major characters really just spoke to me. I was pulled into the world immediately. The tidbits of Russian history combined with the beautiful prose were just through the roof. The evolution of Count Rostov's character from the beginning of this book to the end of this book was truly beautiful. As you know, I'm a sucker for Russia and Russian history and Russian literature, and this book really pulled all of that together for me. I was a little skeptical if some of it was making stereotypes about the Russian psyche and Russian people in general. My one complaint about this book is that it spoiled Anna Karenina for me, which was a real bummer because I wanted to read it this summer and now I know exactly what happens, so thank you, Immortalis. The second book I read this month was titled Reading with Patrick by Michele Quo, and this was another amazing book I read this month. I believe I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars also on Goodreads. The language and writing really spoke to me within this novel. There was beauty and there was pain in this book. It was also a little scary, the similarities that Michele Quo and I have between ourselves. I saw so many different parallels. It was frightening at times. This book, I wanted it to change my perspective and it did. Education is obviously an important theme in this book, but this book helped to educate me. And I know that racial discrimination and racial injustice in this country is a problem that we must continue to fight and remain vigilant over. I've been working really hard to educate myself because I realized that I'm contributing to the problem by not being educated. And so you'll see that this month I've chosen a lot of books to reflect this yearning for education. Usually I choose like 1 or 2 books and I read a couple books a year, but I'm really trying to make sure I'm educated in light of everything that's going on because I want to be the best ally I can and I want to support this movement. I will have a link in the description down below so you can go donate and support the Black Lives Matter movement as well as bail movements and all of that stuff because it is so important and we must do everything we can to support and sustain this movement. I know this is not just a problem that showed up. I know this has been an issue in our country for centuries and that systematic racism and oppression has lived in our country basically since it has been created. And I know that some people may view this as a trend, but it's not, and that's why I'm continuing to do my best work to be an ally and also to educate myself so I can educate those around me and also become a better citizen in this world and a better ally. Please, please, please donate if you can. It's very important. We need to support this movement. The next book I read this month is called The Girl with the Louding Voice by Derry. This book was average. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Everyone talked about how much they loved Aduni, the main character, and I didn't really like her. I felt really guilty about that, but trying to move on. I don't have to like a character that everyone else loves. That's natural, that's normal. Not every character can speak to me. I just found a lot of the content in this book to be a little trite and frustrating because it was trite, and I felt that there was a lot of potential within this novel. All the facts about Lagos and Nigeria were fascinating and also show you the incredible diversity and strength of Nigeria as a country. But as far as the novel goes, the writing and the characters, I found myself becoming frustrated that there wasn't as much room for growth and development as I would have liked there to be, and Aduni frustrated me to no end. The problem also was I think my expectations were way too high for this book. As I said, I loved the cover, but I also loved the premise of the book, and I was disappointed that it wasn't this incredible book to knock me off my feet. I'd also just come off of reading Reading with Patrick and Gentleman in Moscow, which were both incredible books in their own right, and so this book had a lot to go up against. If you had watched my May TBR, which I will have linked in the description down below, you'll know that I had a fourth book on my list, which was I'm the Messenger, but if you couldn't tell from that video, I didn't really want to read that book, and so I didn't. I attempted to then read Shipping News by Annie Proulx and Eight Cousins by Louisa May Alcott, both of which I gave up on, which is very unlike me, and I think I'm currently in a reading slump because I'm just struggling to read in general, but hopefully I'll end that reading slump with this amazing list of books that I have for my June TBR. The first book I would like to read this month is called Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I've been waiting to read this book for a very, very long time. I heard about it for the first time my junior year of high school when a group of kids read it. Actually, only one person read it in my class. I've been waiting to read this book for a long time, and I'm finally glad that I'm getting around to it. I'm already on page 20 something. Not that that's an accomplishment, but it is for me because I'm in a reading slump. I'm really struggling to read anything. Hoping this book will get me out of it. I am quite pulled in so far by the characters. This book follows the story of a character named Jeannie Crawford and her really difficult life that she has faced in the South through various marriages, sorrows, hardships, and it tells her story within her own voice. I don't know much more about it, but I am so excited to read it. The next book I'm reading this month is called A Good Neighborhood by Therese Ann Fowler. If you can tell by the cover of this book, it is also a book of the month. This story follows the life of two families within this close neighborhood in North Carolina, and they could not be more different. The family starts arguing with the simple thing of an oak tree in one of their backyards, but it continues as their two children fall in love with each other, and this really exposes issues within the neighborhood. This book, I'm just going to read this so I don't mess up the wording, that A Good Neighborhood asks big questions about life in America today. What does it mean to be a good neighbor? How do we live alongside one another when we don't see eye to eye? I picked this book because it reminded me a little bit of Little Fires Everywhere, which I absolutely love. But I also picked it because while this book does have heavy themes in it and does explore racism and race and neighborhood issues within our country, it will have some light undertones, maybe overtones about young love, and I hope that this story may provide some hope. The next book I'm reading this month is titled A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. This book follows a young American Army lieutenant during the First World War who's working in an Italian corps, and he falls in love with a young English nurse, and it tells their love story. I am always on the hunt to read World War I books because I feel that World War I is not as well represented as World War II is, and so I'm excited to read this. I also chose it because it's a Hemingway and a classic, and I'm always looking to read more classics to add to my list, as well as read Hemingway because I haven't yet, and how can I say I'm an English major if I haven't read Hemingway? That sounds problematic to me. Now we get to the section of this June TBR where I don't have the actual physical copies of the books I'm going to be reading because they're either on order or they're in the mail to me. So my current book of the month for June 2020 is called The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. It is currently in the mail to me and I am so excited to get it. I don't always order books of the month, but when they come out, I scroll through them on my app, read the quick little synopses, and sometimes I'm like, do I want this book? Do I not want this book? But when I saw this book, The Vanishing Half, I knew I needed to have it. The premise just got me right away. This book tells the story of two twin sisters who live in the Deep South, and when they're 16, they run away and eventually separate, and they live completely different lives. One differences between these sisters just increases over time, and it is a story that spans multi-generations and is all about sisters. Anyone who knows me knows that I am a sucker for sister books. I love reading them, maybe because I have sisters, but also just because I love the tight relationships that sisters can have. This book discusses a lot about race and racism in America and racial identity, but it just goes beyond that into general identity. These two sisters are twins. They should be exactly alike, and yet they are living completely different lives because of their identities, situations, circumstances, etc. I am so excited to get my hands in this book. I can't wait till it comes in the mail, and I have very high expectations, which, as we saw with one of my last books, was not a good idea, but I'm hopeful that this book will live up to its expectations. I have been in the mood for fantasy for a long time, but we don't really have fantasy books at my house that I have easy access to, and so I've decided to order 2 fantasy books. The first book that I've ordered is titled The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I'm not going to talk too much about the synopsis because if any of you read fantasy, you should know about this book. It's been out for a while, and I've had it on my to-read list for basically since I started my Goodreads account. I've been eyeing it in nearly every bookstore I go to, and I finally just decided to bite the bullet because I know that if I want a good fantasy, this book will fulfill that. Everyone loves this book. This book has such rave reviews, and I am so excited to read it. The second book I've decided to purchase is The Echo North by Johanna Ruth Meyer. This is also a fantasy book that has been on my TBR on Goodreads, but for not as long. This book follows the story of Echo, whose entire world falls apart when her father disappears and is presumed dead, but she finds him protected by this wolf, sent to live in the mountainside, and these rooms are sewn together and you have to constantly be sewing them. Otherwise, they unravel and disappear, and there's a man stuck in the mirror, and then there's this mysterious wolf, so it's all very mysterious, and I am all here for it. This book has excellent reviews. Whenever I'm questioning what book I'm buying, because I like to buy books that I know I'm going to love and not regret owning, which still happens to me, unfortunately, but I try to avoid that at all costs. This book also has excellent reviews. It is a newer book, which I love to read newer books, so I can kind of try to stay caught up with the times. I tend to be stuck in older books and reading older books, but that's okay. You know, it's important to read books from all years. It's a very interesting premise, and it kind of gives me Uprooted vibes by Naomi Novik. I might be wrong about that, but something about Echo and the story that she's experiencing just reminds me of that, but I am so excited to read that. I love the cover of this book. Hopefully I'll read more than 6 books this month, but those are just the books that I've come up with. We'll see if I actually ever get out of this reading slump. If you have any book recommendations, specifically fantasy, I would love to have them in the comments down below. And please remember to click through my links to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you all next week.